right, folks. So we are going to be talking today about the vagus nerve and vagal toning. And a lot of understanding the vagus nerve has to do with understanding the nervous system as a whole, right? And so folks who have already been working on some of my support protocols, or maybe have read my book, you know a bit about the nervous system as an orchestrator, right? As basically a part of your body that modulates every other system, right? So, depending on what state our nervous system is in, there's going to be changes that go through every other system in the body. So, this is going to be our thought patterns, how much of our cognitive ability we have access to, what our metabolism is going to look like, how well our immune system is functioning, how well our circulation is, what our breathing pattern is like, what hormones we're secreting, how well we're digesting. I mean, really, you name it, whatever state your nervous system is in is going to define how that is functioning. Now, the primary pathway of modulating all these responses is going to be the vagus nerve. And so what the vagus nerve does is it really modulates that parasympathetic branch of the nervous system, and that's going to be the calming part of the nervous system, right? The down-regulating part of the nervous system. So depending on how active the vagus nerve is, I know it's a little bit contradictory, but if the vagus nerve is more active, you're going to have more access to that calming response in the nervous system because that's primarily what it orchestrates. Now, I love thinking about the vagus nerve as this physiological embodiment of our mind-body connection. So the vagus nerve, the name vagus actually means wanderer, right? And the vagus nerve really does wander through our whole body. So it starts up at the brainstem, and there's branches that go up into the face, into the ears, into the eyes, and then it really wanders through the rest of the body. It's just showing the heart here, but honestly, it's connected to nearly every other organ in the body. And then you see these nerve endings get a little longer down here. That's because it winds down into the digestive tract. And it is about 70% of our whole nervous system is in our digestive tract. It's that lower branch of the vagus nerve that is intertwined in our gut lining. So everything happening in our body is modulated by this connection between brain and body, which is modulated by the vagus nerve. It's a two-way informational highway. So there is information that goes from brain to gut, and there's also information that goes from gut to brain. About 80% of the information goes from gut to brain, and that's part of why healing the gut is so important when it comes to your health of your vagus nerve. That's why we do our gut rebuilding diets. That's why we really work on healing the gut lining in our practices. But 20% goes from brain to gut. And so we have other ways of intervening in the health of our vagus nerve as well. And that 20% really shouldn't be neglected, right? Any way that we can intervene in the health of our vagus nerve, we should really take advantage of. So, as I mentioned before, a highly toned vagus nerve is very responsive to its environment. It means it can easily come in and out of that parasympathetic mode, right? Now, there is a measurement called HRV, which you might have heard. That stands for heart rate variability. And basically, this is a measure of how toned our vagus nerve is. So the higher the HRV, the healthier your vagus nerve is. And they do this by seeing the variability in your heart rate between your in-breath and your out-breath. I know that seems really wild, but in reality, that is how responsive our vagus nerve should be to our environment. It should actually change our heart rate slightly depending on when we are inhaling or when we are exhaling. Because on a micro scale, when we inhale, it's a little bit of a sympathetic response. This is why people like hyperventilate into panic attacks, right? Because they're inhaling faster than they're exhaling, right? Besides even the imbalance in oxygen and carbon dioxide that's happening, that's stimulating your sympathetic activating nervous system, right? And then when people say, oh, calm down, take a deep breath, do a big sigh. Well, it's because our exhale is a slightly down-regulating response that is actually activating our parasympathetic, our calming nervous system every time we exhale. So when you sigh or take these long extended inhales, it really does physically calm you down. And so we have this little ebb and flow. Our bodies are really in this pulsation place, right? Where we should be ebbing and flowing in response to our environment and even in between our inhale and exhale. So that's what the HRV is. And what this shows is that the vagus nerve should be every second gathering new information, and it should be highly responsive to its environment. So everything we encounter should really modulate what state our nervous system is in and how our different organ systems are responding. And a lot of chronic illness symptoms are from low HRV, meaning that your vagus nerve is actually not responsive to your environment. It's either over or under reacting, or it's getting kind of stuck in certain states, right? So if we have a very responsive and flexible nervous system that is, getting stressed when appropriate, but then coming down when appropriate, and changing its heart rate, your heart rate in response to certain things, and then letting it go back to baseline, that makes you feel really safe in your body, right? Because you know that your body is going to respond appropriately to the activities and stressors of your life. And this is what allows us to also really be resilient, right? Like, if you're an intense athlete, like you have to have a highly toned vagus nerve because you're going to push your body into an extreme stress state, expecting that it's going to come down when it's ready to, right? So this is really about our overall mind-body health. So, as I was saying before, poor vagal tone is indicated in nearly any chronic health condition, right? And in fact, Stephen Porges, who is the neuroscientist who developed polyvagal theory, which is, kind of and he studies the vagus nerve full time. He actually specializes his research in working with kids with autism and young adults with dysautonomia and POTS, because he sees such consistent vagus nerve disruption in people with these conditions. But if you Google like vagal tone and like any of these conditions, you will see research studies come up. We need a appropriately responsive vagus nerve to come out of anxiety, to come out of depression, to come out of PTSD. A lot of times with autism, we have low vagal tone. People are not socially connecting, right? They don't have enough vagal tone in their face to connect socially with other people or understand what other people are saying. Similar with POTS and dysautonomia, these issues are of the autonomic nervous system, and generally your heart rate and your breathing rate and your circulation is not responding appropriately to your environment. It may be under or overreacting to stimuli, right? A common thing with POTS is you stand up and you feel like you're going to faint. Well, it's because your blood pressure is not responding fast enough to this change in your environment of you going from sitting to standing, right? Even things like multiple sclerosis are associated, and other kinds of neurological disorders are associated with low vagal tone. And also digestive disorders, especially things like gastroparesis and chronic constipation. We need a highly toned vagus nerve to stimulate peristalsis, right? Our digestive tract is directly connected to our vagus nerve, and if our vagus nerve is not responding appropriately to the fact that there is food or fecal matter in your digestive tract, it's not going to move things along appropriately. SIBO also is often caused, partly at least, by poor vagal tone because a lot of the valves are not opening and closing correctly in the digestive tract, and bacteria is getting into places where it shouldn't be. And so toning the vagus nerve is an important part of recovering from any of these conditions and more. So how do you assess your vagal tone? Well, basically, if you have a chronic illness, you probably have poor vagal tone. So you can kind of just assume that, right? That's very, very common. But there are other ways to assess it too. One is if the soft palate in your mouth is asymmetrical. I know when I talk about this, everyone's like running to their bathroom or whipping out their phone to look and see. I did that too. But basically, if you open your mouth and you look down into your throat, You see your uvula, right? You see that little uvula hanging down. On either side of your uvula is the soft palate. And if one side is drooping, that is a sign of poor vagal tone. So that's something to assess. And this is a really cool thing. I know there's fancy gadgets now people have that like track your vagal tone, right? So some people are just going to like have their little aura ring or whatever that tells them what their vagal tone is, or their HRV is, I should say. But that aside, this is the like poor man's way to assess your vagal tone. If you do a vagus nerve stimulating practice, or you want to see if whatever dietary or supplement protocol you're on is helping your vagal tone, you can see if this improves over time. So you can look at it before and after you do a vagal toning practice, for example. It should respond very quickly. I've done this before. I actually have videos on my YouTube channel where I show the difference between the symmetry in my soft palate before and after I did chanting, or before and after I did tremoring, which is the two things we're going to talk about as improving vagal tone. The other thing would be if your upper vertebrae, so C1 and C4 that are at the top of your neck, if those are misaligned, and this can be assessed by a good chiropractor, right? And not necessarily the type of chiropractor that's just gonna like pop you real quick and then send you on your way, but someone who's actually like really gonna do a full functional assessment, right? They're gonna be able to tell you if that C1 and C2 are misaligned, and if it is, if you have chronic posture issue, if you have like your neck jutting forward all the time like that, that is likely impinging on the blood flow of your vagus nerve and is going to cause poor vagal tone. So getting that corrected through gentle chiropractic or cranial sacral therapy is also very, very important. A lot of people with poor vagal tone have a lot of tension in the face, neck, and muscles. So they're kind of just like always in this very like tense activated state, right? And this is really a feedback loop, obviously, right? Because we have a lot of anxiety. Some of that is caused by if we have, a lot of issues coming down from stress. A lot of that is caused by poor vagal tone. But then it's a feedback loop because the more tense we are chronically, the more blood flow is cut off to the vagus nerve. So relaxing that, right? Checking in with yourself. Are my shoulders up by my ears? Is my chest open, right? Like just seeing if you have like all this tension that you could relax intentionally. That's going to be helpful. Okay, and then you can start doing vagal toning exercises. So as I said, 80% of the information that goes up and down the vagus nerve goes from gut to brain. So making sure that you're on a gut healing diet, on a nervous system healing diet, doing some of the nervous system supportive supplements, that I have in my supplement protocols. These are key because 80% of your vagal tone is going to be modulated by the balance of bacteria in your gut and the health of your gut lining. So that's always priority, but then we can work on that other 20% too. We can work from the brain down. So one of those things is going to be a tremor practice. Now, for those of you who don't know what that is, this is referring to TRE, or tension and trauma releasing exercises. This is a method of nervous system regulation that stimulates a primal tremoring response in the body. So the truth is that as animals, right, as organisms, humans should really be in constant frequency or vibration or pulsation. And I'm not saying like that we should be constantly shaking. Obviously, a lot of nervous system disorders have to do with shaking or tremoring uncontrollably all the time. But that's actually a very healthy state for the body to be in, is to be able to shake or tremor. And what this does is it actually lowers stress hormones and releases tension that is chronically stuck in our fascia or our muscles. And so a lot of times people with nervous system disorders where they shake or tremor uncontrollably, they do have a long history of stress or trauma that have really repressed or kept in. And the body is often just trying to resolve that as a part of their neurological condition. But we can get ahead of that and we can actually facilitate the release of this stuff ahead of time, right? We can really facilitate the release of this stuff without having to develop a neurological disorder. Or some of this can really actually help the symptoms of these neurological disorders as well if we already have them. And so this is basically where you learn some very simple exercises to stimulate this tremor response in your body, and you lie there and you just kind of let your nervous system release on its own. There are YouTube videos from the Tension and Trauma Releasing Exercises organization on YouTube that you can find, as well as I am a practitioner and would be happy to do sessions with people as they would like. I do them on Zoom all the time. So that is one thing that we can do. And like I said, I have measured this kind of vagal tone assessment myself before and after tremoring, and it makes a huge difference in your vagal tone. So it's a great daily practice. Now, to release tension in your face, you can actually stretch your eyes. This was a method invented by Stanley Rosenberg, who's a chiropractor out of, I think, Sweden or Denmark. I can't quite remember. But you basically keep your head forward and you stretch your eyes all the way one way and all the way the other way. And if you want, you can even do them in different directions, like top diagonal, down diagonal. And you can do this for a few seconds to even a minute in each direction, right? And basically you just want to go as far as you can without causing any like pain. You know, sometimes people have very tight muscles around their eyes when they have poor vagal tone. So don't push into pain. Just move your eyes as far as feels comfortable and feel that tension release. Sometimes that is a real game changer for folks. A lot of times, especially with vision issues or light sensitivity, this can be really helpful. Similarly, if you have a lot of sound sensitivity, or audio disturbances or tinnitus, ear ringing, you can release tension in your face by pulling on your ears as well, and this should release the auditory nerve. So you can gently tug on your ears. You can even massage the inside of your ears, like massage the cartilage and try to release some tension there. You can also give yourself a little face massage. I really like tension points along the jaw. I like one that's like to the side of the nose under the cheekbone. That's a really good one for releasing tension in the around the mouth. I also the eyeglasses point, right? That spot on the bridge of your nose, that one really gets me. I feel like my whole forehead releases when I do that. But you can explore, right? Like just give yourself a gentle little face massage. It's a great self-care practice, and a lot of us have really tense, tight face muscles without realizing it, and that impinges on our vagus nerve tone. You can also make exaggerated facial expressions in the mirror. So people with poor vagal tone very commonly, sorry, there's a siren going by. I don't know if you guys can hear that. But people with poor vagal tone, they often have these very like blank facial expressions, right? And they'll kind of like, they won't be super expressive. They'll just kind of look at you without much expressiveness. Sometimes they even have like droopy eyes. And they're hard to connect with, right? And unfortunately, this is why a lot of people with chronic illnesses have trouble community building, or they have trouble keeping friends or connecting with family, is because you have poor vagal tone. And when you have poor vagal tone, you're in this kind of survival state in the nervous system, right? And you're not really able to socially connect in a deeper way. And a lot of times people can feel that, unfortunately. And it's very subconscious, right? So a lot of times people with chronic illness will say like, oh, I don't know, like people just don't seem to like me. I don't really connect with people very well. I just feel like I'm awkward and people think I'm weird. And sometimes that's true, unfortunately, but it's because they're unnerved by you a little bit, right? And people would tell me this too when I was very sick. It's like, gosh, you just don't feel very warm, like I'm just having a hard time connecting with you or understanding you, and it was because, yeah, like my facial expression was very just like, toned down. And I just had a hard time connecting with people. And so it's this, people can read that on a subconscious level. And so a way to improve that is to actually exaggerate your facial expressions and intentionally open your eyes a little wider and exaggerate emotional expressions at yourself in the mirror. Bonus if you make yourself laugh, because that's also a vagal toning exercise. So I often recommend that people do this before they go on a date or connect with family or go to a community event or anything that you might be doing. or even, before you go to the doctor, like whatever, if you don't get out much, like anytime you interact or you're going to be interacting with someone or going out in public, make those exaggerated facial expressions because that'll turn that social engagement system on, right? And then you're more likely to feel more connected to the people that you're talking to. I mentioned that belly laughing is really good, and it actually, like the contraction of the diaphragm, actually really stimulates vagal tone. And when we laugh, we get into a more parasympathetic state. So I recommend that people like watch or listen to comedy daily, right? If you can, like try to do or hang out with someone that you think is really funny and makes you laugh. Like call a friend who's really goofy, like watch stand up, watch cartoons, like whatever you have to do to get yourself to laugh. And if you feel like you have trouble laughing just because life has been really hard, and you've really been struggling with depression, like fake it. It's okay. Like pretend to laugh. I know it's going to feel so awkward at first, but man, it will eventually work. So fake it at first. And then pretty soon, you'll start laughing for real. Laughter yoga is a thing too, and a lot of times they have online classes. That's a great option for folks. Okay, humming. So this is defined as singing with your lips closed, right? And what that does is instead of letting all the vibration out, although singing is great too, but if you close your lips and create this vibrational frequency, in your throat, in your body, it will vibrate your vagus nerve. And this is a great vagal toning practice. So if you are secular, you can just hum a musical scale. You can, if you have a yoga practice or you're interested in kind of Buddhist or Hindu practices, you could do some of the sacred syllables like Om or Vam. For Christian or other religious folks, what is your favorite hymn? What is a song that you sing in church or in your worship? And you can hum that, right? And you want to ideally hum different tones, not just the same one over and over again. Now, these are a little more advanced, right? So not everyone should start out with these, but gargling vigorously, like your throat should kind of hurt a little bit afterwards. That's a great option. And engage your gag reflex, like put a popsicle stick on your tongue and make yourself gag a little bit. These will stimulate your vagus nerve. So don't start with those, but those are options. Okay, bonus vagal toning exercise. And this is really the game changer, you guys. This is the one that really makes a difference for people, but you have to be ready for it. It's not something I would jump into right away. I would try some of the others first and get a practice going. But cold exposure basically creates a forced restart for the nervous system. It has a ton of health benefits. It can also stimulate our metabolism, increase our detoxification support, improve our immune health, and it lowers inflammation in the nervous system. Like it has an anti-inflammatory effect on inflammation in the brain and nervous system, but it also seems to really reset the vagal tone, right? And a lot of people with neurological issues or mental health issues find that the most potent intervention they've ever found is to expose themselves to cold. It is used to treat so-called treatment-resistant cases of a lot of psychiatric disorders. So if you have a very sensitive nervous system still, then ease into this. Like I said, do the other vagal toning practices first, get acclimated to that. But ideally, for optimal effect, you want to do 45 degrees Fahrenheit or lower for 4 minutes, 3 times a week. Now, other people prefer to do it daily. I have people with chronic fatigue or neuropathy or other neurological symptoms that find that it improves, or depression even, and they find that it improves their symptoms so much they really prefer to do it every day. That's totally fine, but then take it down to 1 to 2 minutes a day. That should be sufficient. However, don't let that stop you. As I said, that's the optimal thing to work up to for full therapeutic effect. But even 40 seconds of cold exposure has documented benefits for the brain and nervous system. So just start where you can. Totally fine. So how do you do this? Well, for some people who live in a really cold area, you could probably just walk outside in a tank top, right? So if you live in a really cold place, I mean, I would put shoes and socks on probably, but you could go out in shorts and a tank top, right, in winter, and you can get that cold therapy, right? You know, you take a little walk in the cold. But for most people, cold water is going to be the best way to do it. You know, if you have rivers or if you have an ocean nearby, I mean, natural water is great. But you can just do it in your home shower or your bathtub, right? Totally fine. As long as the water gets cold enough. I've had people living in, you know, more tropical regions who like the water just didn't get cold enough. And so they do have to do like a proper ice bath. But for a lot of folks, their water gets cold enough, they can just turn the water all the way on cold and get it to that therapeutic temperature. There are commercial cold plunges available. I have a Polar Monkey and I do have an affiliate code with them with a discount. So if you want that, definitely message me. Maybe I'll post it on the forum as well. But you can message me as well. They are expensive, but you can be very exact with the temperature, which is nice. I would either ease into temperature or timing as opposed to both. I would just keep one variable consistent and one variable you can move. So one would be to just decrease, you know, do the full time, but decrease the temperature slowly. Honestly, you know, that one is the more gentler route. So if you're very sensitive, that might be best. But I just see people get stuck at some point because they're just like not willing to keep turning the temperature down. So if you can tolerate it, my preference is that people just start with the coldest temperature, but ease up on time, right? So, you know, do it for like 10 seconds to start, you know? If that's just too much, you can also just do it by immersing your face in ice water, right? So you could put a bowl of ice water on the table and just put your face in it for a few seconds at a time, or put an ice pack on your chest. Those are good starter activities as well if you're very, very sensitive. And the most important thing to remember is to breathe, right? A lot of you are familiar with Wim Hof. Part of the reason that he is able to withstand like superhuman cold conditions, right? I mean, he's doing way beyond what I'm talking about in this document. And it's because he has such a potent breathwork practice, right? His tissues are so oxygenated that he can pull off what seem like almost superhuman feats, right? So we don't have to go that extreme. And actually, Wim Hof breathing is pretty intense. So I don't always recommend it for people who are significantly, you know, sensitive and ill. But you do need to breathe, right? So taking some deep breaths, maybe doing some square breathing, or just taking some like slow inhales and exhales before you do it, just making sure you've got some oxygenation in your tissues. And keep that up when you get in, right? You're not going to get the same benefit if you are in it and you are just tensing up and you're just getting through it, right? If you can't stop yourself from tensing up, you're doing it too long. Just stop and keep practicing, right? You need to keep your muscles relaxed. You need to keep a slow and steady breath. And that is part of the benefit, is that you are mind over mattering things, right? And you are saying like, wow, I can do incredibly hard things and stay calm. I can stay grounded in the state of a significant stressor, right? And it's going to boost your dopamine like crazy to do that. And you are going to just feel like on top of the world. Now, if you run cold, which a lot of people with chronic illness do because of temperature dysregulation issues, right, with the vagus nerve, or because of thyroid issues, right? Some people think, oh, I shouldn't do that because I run cold anyway. Actually, cold therapy is the best thing to boost your metabolism and increase your basal body temperature. The more people are exposed to cold, the higher their basal body temperature gets. So it's actually really, really good for that. Just when you're first starting out, make sure you've got like a cup of hot tea and like fleece pajamas waiting for you, right? You know, have the heater going in your room and go right in there and curl up in bed, right? So just let yourself warm up afterwards if you're worried about that, but it shouldn't really be a problem. Okay, great. That's my presentation. I